Yeah, it looks like we are live on Facebook.
Okay. All right, so we're live now.
Yep, we are live.
All right. Okay, so I should share my screen now.
Well, you can, if you would like to introduce yourself with your face visible, you can then start the screen share when after you've said a few words.
All right, we'll give people a few minutes to sign on here.
Okay. So I can see that right now what's being streamed is a video of me. So it's toggling between whoever is speaking. So if you
Okay.
pin your video, then you'll see yourself. You hover over your own image and select pin video.
Okay, we're learning.
We are learning.
Welcome everybody that's joining us. We're just going to give a few more minutes so people can sign on.
So if you pin your video, then you'll see yourself.
Okay, I just want to remind everyone, if you have any questions, please send them to the library and we can try to answer your questions during the video. If not, I will be available afterwards to answer all questions, and I'll give some of my information later on. So give maybe 1 or 2 more minutes for people to sign on here. Okay. I think we are going to go live now and just start the presentation. So my name is Dr. Raymond Suarez. I'm a board certified psychiatrist. Thank you everyone for joining in, and thank you to the Guilford Library for hosting this event. I think it's a very necessary topic. I'll tell you a little bit about myself. Again, I'm a psychiatrist here in the Lakes region for Lakes Region Wellness. And this is going to be a discussion about unconscious bias. And again, I hope everyone feels free to participate and ask any questions. I want this to be a safe place for everyone to share. So please be respectful of everyone's opinions. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen right now. Okay, so again, I'm Dr. Suarez. This is Unconscious Bias. And the whole purpose of this is to explore why your truth may not be the truth. And again, this is not a judgment zone. We're just going to explore some facts and some studies. Here's my business, Lakes Region Wellness. You can reach me at this website or this contact information here. A little bit of disclosure. So I'm going to present some scientific data. Some people find this topic somewhat unsettling to hear. I've given this lecture in many forms on and off now for about 8 years. Never had a bad experience, but that being said, there's a first time for everything. So I just want to make sure that we're going to maintain a safe space here. I want open, respectful dialogue, but I definitely encourage an open dialogue. The opinions, any opinions that are presented here are my own and do not necessarily represent that of Guilford Public Library. And any medical opinions that may be offered during this lecture are meant to be generalities and do not necessarily apply to any specific individuals. And this lecture contains some studies. Some of the studies are older studies and may not use inclusive adjectives and pronouns based on current standards, but just please take that with a grain of salt. Okay, so I'm going to take you through a visualization exercise. Okay, so this is, I'm going to ask you to visualize a few scenarios. The visualization part of this is very important. So I want you to pay attention to that. So if you can close your eyes right now, take a deep breath, and really visualize this experience in your mind. So you're late for a flight to attend the unveiling of the latest brainchild of the top tech company in the world, where you will be an honored guest. Congratulations. You're in a rush though. You're rushing through the airport, you get through the check-in, you get through security, you rush to the gates, you get there just as they're closing. You're hurried on board and the pilot comes out just as you're entering the plane. The pilot shakes your hand and welcomes you on board. Finally, you start to relax and have an uneventful flight. You arrive at your destination, take a taxi to the hotel, where you quickly change and head out to a local restaurant for a nice dinner before your big meeting. The food's amazing, and when the chef gets wind that you are in the restaurant, a special dessert is sent to your table. At the end of the meal, the head chef comes out to greet you. There's a couple at the next table. They're there celebrating their engagement. They finally recognize you and ask if it'll be okay to take a picture with you. You politely oblige and then realize that you are once again running late, so once again, you're off in a hurry. You get to your meeting just in time as the CEO of the company is taking the stage. After opening remarks are finished, you're invited by the CEO to come give a speech on stage, but you realize that you forgot your speech in the hotel, and as you politely shake hands and take the microphone, you look the CEO in the eye and realize this is all a dream. Okay, if you did participate and had your eyes closed, you can open them now. Now let's review the images that went through your mind. And remember, this is a judgment-free zone. No one is judging any of the images here. This is just meant to realize what types of images we conjure when we think about things. So let's think about this. What race was your pilot? What nationality was your pilot? What about gender? What about the gender of your chef? What about the CEO? Was the couple at the next table a same-sex couple? How old were they? Did any of the people in your imagery have any physical flaws or disabilities? And again, this is just meant to point out that we have an unconscious bias. We think of things in a certain way. So for example, we said that the couple was there with their engagement. Oftentimes that conjures up a younger couple, and it would be a heterosexual younger couple. There's no right or wrong answers for these things. And oftentimes the thoughts that we have, the images that we bring into our mind are different than how we would explain our personal views. And again, it's not a judgment, it's not right or wrong, it's just recognizing that this is how we see the world. So let's get some definitions out of the way. So unconscious, by definition, that means it's out of our consciousness, right? So it's the part of the mind which is inaccessible to the conscious mind, but which affects behavior and emotion. That's pretty important there. So it's not in the front of our mind, but yet it's affecting a lot of our behaviors and our emotions. Bias. So bias is prejudice in favor of or against one thing, person, or group compared with another, usually in a way considered to be unfair. Now, this can go either way. It can be positive or negative, but usually when we speak about bias, we're talking about a negative connotation. And the definition of bias starts out with prejudice. So what is prejudice? Prejudice is prejudging, judging before we have all the information. Implicit. So you'll hear the word implicit a few times during this lecture. Unconscious bias is also known as implicit bias. It's implied, though not plainly expressed. So now that we have those definitions, let's look at the definition of unconscious bias or implicit bias. So what is it? It's a form of rapid cognition. It finds patterns based on small bits of information. So remember the prejudging part. So we have small bits of information and we jump to a conclusion. It's a very ancient reflexive system. It's adaptive. It's a danger detector. So we're surrounded by new things every single day. We can't keep reinventing the wheel. So built into our DNA is this reflexive system that allows us to learn based on previous experiences and then jump to conclusions in order to stay alive. The issues that we deal with nowadays is that we don't always need this danger detector in the way that we use it. And so sometimes it's misled and leads us down a false pathway. Another definition would be referring to social stereotypes about certain groups of people that individuals form outside of their own consciousness. So again, this is outside of our conscious thought. So why does this system exist? So anyone that's seen the movie The Croods, it's one of my favorite kids movies. You'll see why this system exists. And I'm going to show you a little clip here. Hopefully.
Good. How about a story, huh?
Oh, yeah, tell us a story.
Okay, can I borrow that? Thank you. Eep, your old favorite.
I haven't played with that thing in years.
Tonight we'll hear the story of Crispy Bear. A long time ago, this little bear was alive. She was alive because she listened to her father and lived her life in routine and darkness and terror. So she was happy. But Crispy had one terrible problem. She was filled with curiosity. Yes, yes. And one day, while she was in a tree, the curious little bear wanted to climb to the top. And no sooner than she climbed to the top, she saw something new and died.
Just like that?
Yes. Her last moments of terror still frozen on her face.
So again, that's I think a cute little clip to show why this system exists. So, we've evolved, hopefully, since that time, but this system was there to keep us safe. New things could be dangerous. And so we didn't want to go outside of the norm. We wanted to stay within our own group. We had structure within that group, and that the people who followed those rules survived. And so along with that survival came this way of seeing the world. And again, we've grown as society since that time, so we don't need always this type of thought process, but it still persists and it's there unconsciously. And I think this does a good job of kind of taking a look at that. So throughout this lecture, I'll have some visual aids here with some optical illusions, really to point out the fact that we can't even trust our own sensations. So you'll see here that there's a bunch of squares and lines and dots in between the square corners. And when you stare at one of the dots, it's white, but then the ones in the periphery are gray. As soon as you move your line of sight to one of the gray dots, that dot becomes white and the other ones are gray. So again, we can't even trust our own senses all the time. And this is part of the system because, again, we don't have time to think about everything. And so we have these built-in kind of go-tos. So here's a surgical dilemma. A father and his son are in a car accident. The father dies at the scene and the son is rushed to the hospital. At the hospital, the surgeon looks at the boy and says, "I can't operate on this boy. He's my son." How can this be? So this has been around the internet, and it's a common, and I'll use light quotations, riddle that people will pass around. And I can tell you, again, I've been doing this lecture for about 8 years now, mostly to groups of physicians. And as physicians, and in psychiatry, there are a lot of female physicians. There is very few that actually think that the surgeon is the boy's mother. And I've had all kinds of plausible combinations, permutations of how this could be, when the simplest explanation is that the surgeon is the boy's mother. And the reason that is because we have certain views of things. So just as the first exercise pointed out, when we think of pilot, most people will think of a male. Most people will think of a white male. Now, this is not everyone, but it's the majority of people think this way or have this image in their mind. When people think of surgeon, they think of male. And this is important and it has implications in all types of things in life and in all types of rules that get put down, laws that get made, jobs that get offered. So we're going to take a look at all of this. Here's another optical illusion. It's pretty straightforward for this one. All these lines are completely straight, but the more you stare at them, the kind of more they seem to bend, especially around the edges. And again, it's a pure optical illusion. So here's one more activity. I think this is the last activity that I have for you during the lecture. But what I want you to do is pay attention. So this is an old activity. It's a very old movie, very grainy, partially intentionally grainy, partially because it's a very old clip. There are two images, two movies that are superimposed on one another. And again, that's intentional because the goal is to show that we have a difficult time kind of blocking out extraneous information. So what you're going to have to do is try to count the number of times the ball is passed between people who are wearing black shirts. And you'll see it here. So it's a 40-second clip. Pay attention to the players in the black shirts and count the number of times that they pass the basketball.
10. 20. 30. 40. 50.
Okay, so there were 20 passes and a woman walking with an umbrella. I don't know if all of you caught that. Some people do, and it's been, there she is on the screen. So she walks right across the screen as the people are passing the basketball. Now, this has been done a few different times. I've seen a commercial one time that did the same kind of thing with a man in a gorilla suit. And what this shows us is that, again, we can't pay attention to everything, right? There's a lot of things that are going on right now. If you just kind of pause and think about the things that are going on in the room around you, there's a bunch of noise. There might be a fan going or an air conditioner, or there might be a dog barking, people talking, just a clock ticking on the wall, a lot of stimuli that's going on. And if we were to just try to pay attention to all that and try to make sense out of it, we would be completely overwhelmed. So our brain can just focus on one thing. The problem is that if we're focusing on one thing, we tend to shut everything else out. So we see what we want to see and we hear what we want to hear, and we miss other things that are going on. So if you were one of the few, or I'm sorry, one of the people who couldn't see the woman walking across the screen with an umbrella, if I asked you afterwards, oh, did you see the woman walking across the screen? You would say, no, there was no woman walking across the screen. And that would have been your reality. You would believe that, and that is part of the problem, because again, that happened, but you did not experience it because you weren't necessarily paying attention to it. So again, we see what we want to see and we hear what we want to hear. So you take this image and put it on its side, and that man's face becomes liar. So oftentimes we lie to ourselves, and again, our reality is not always a reality. So we've been talking about this in the unconscious bias. So how do we test for it? How do we know that this exists? How can we prove that it's there? So there's something called an implicit association test, an IAT. Harvard came up with it in 1998 was when it was first introduced. What it does is it measures bias that may not consciously be recognized. If you go to the website that's listed here, it's actually pretty interesting. You just need to put an email address in, and it's free to sign in. And they keep data on all the people who take these tests, and you can learn about your own unconscious bias. And it's confidential in terms of they just ask for your email address, so you can give a fake one if you want. But it is interesting to kind of put that out there and see where your bias lies. So what it does is it measures the time it takes subjects to match representatives of social groups to particular attributes. So social groups would be things like age, gender, race, these types of things. Attributes would be things like good, bad, cooperative, stubborn, etc. I actually took one that viewed mental health. So they have a bunch of different ways to look at these biases. And it operationalizes the unconscious bias by the hypothesis that subjects will match a group representative to an attribute more quickly if they connect these factors in their minds. And I'm going to explain this in a better way in 1 second. So this is regardless of their awareness of this connection. Or I could say irregardless now, which has been added to the dictionary. So this will be an example of what an IAT screenshot would look like. So you would get this screen where you have a group on the left and a group on the right. So there will be Black patient or bad on the left, white patient or good on the right. And your job will be to classify.
Raymond?
Yes.
Raymond, sorry to interrupt you. It looks like the video had a copyright claim when we showed the Crudes clip.
Okay.
And so I think we should stop the stream and restart it because people are unable to view the video.
Oh, okay. Okay, so how do we do that? So stop the share?
Cancel the live on Facebook.
So I don't know how we do that.
I think on the bottom right where you went to select go live on Facebook in Zoom. You should be able to cancel. Okay. Yeah, in Zoom you should be able to cancel the go live. Stop streaming to Facebook, I think.
Hold on.